Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining in for today's RAVENNA webinar, which is quite a bit different from what we have done the past few weeks. Today, we have a roundtable webinar. It's called Ask the Experts. You will have a chance to also ask some questions during the webinar, whatever you like. It's a Q&A function available. Please use that Q&A function to ask any question you like, and we should sort them into those we have already received by email, and we hope we have the chance to discuss every question which is coming up. So let's jump right into the action. Of course, we have a panel today. It's myself. My name is Andreas Hildebrand from the RAVENNA technology guys. The company behind that is ALC Networx, working out of Munich. And the sole task we are doing here at ALC Networx is developing and maintaining the RAVENNA technology, which is now in its 10th anniversary. Unfortunately, we wanted to have a big celebration starting at IBC, but since IBC has been cancelled, we most probably will postpone this to our, well, 11th anniversary then. So with me, I'd like to welcome Claudio Becker-Foss from DirectOut. He's CTO there. DirectOut is a German company founded back in 2008. And they are doing some very nice and professional audio broadcast equipment coming out of the MADI range of audio interfaces. And now they have also converged most of their products into network-based products with RAVENNA AS67, SMPTE ST2110, and also some Dante interfaces. DirectOut is a partner since 2009. And Claudio, you're welcome.
Hello, everybody.
All right, next up on our roundtable is Claude Cellier. Claude is CEO of Merging Technology out of Switzerland. Merging is very well known for its most famous high-end audio editing workstation, the Pyramix, and also the Ovation Show automation system. They have contributed the most finest I/O interfaces for the network side of things, the Horus, the Harpis, and lately the Anubis interfaces. They are also a very early adopter of RAVENNA and of course support AS67 and 2110 as well. So welcome, Claude.
Hello, Andreas. Hello, Claudio. Nice to meet you this afternoon as well as all the other.
Okay, next up in the round is Daniel Boldt from Meinberg. Meinberg is known as the masters of time, the timekeepers, so to say. So they operate worldwide and have contributed to establishing the PTP, the Precision Time Standard. And of course, they are offering any sort of equipment related to timekeeping, not just for the broadcast industry, but also for, power, telecom, financial industries, and others. So there's a well-known, very reputable brand in the market. So welcome, Daniel.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks to be in your round.
Okay, and then last but not least, we have a special guest today. It's Terry Holton, chairman of the audio workgroup of Ames, the Alliance for Interoperable Media Solutions. Terry is based in the UK. He has worked for a long time as general manager of Yamaha R&D Center there in London, and is now basically working as a consultant focused on anything media networking. And he is best known these days for his work and contributions to Ames. And I'm sure he will tell us a bit more about that during the conversation. So welcome, Terry.
Hello.
Hey, Terry. Very good. And we'll have a moderator today because we have to cope with quite a lot of questions and some organizing stuff here. So I'd like to welcome Roland Hemming. He's also based in the UK, working as a consultant, as independent audio consultant, has experience for over 20 years. And you can definitely call him an expert in the use and adoption of AOIP throughout any sort of project, actually. His company has been founded in 2005, and they are mostly in the business of design management of audio installation projects and research and advice of network audio systems. Basically, they're doing any consulting task which is related to audio networking. So welcome, Roland, and I guess you can actually take it from there. To the audience, remember, if you want to ask something, just use the Q&A function, which is offered by the GoToWebinar control. So we're happy to include them in our discussion today. So Roland, your turn.
Okay, well, welcome, gentlemen. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming to this. This is certainly a different webinar to the ones we've held before, and we have had a whole load of questions submitted already, because there was an email address to submit questions to. So actually, I'm not going to mess around. I'm just going to get straight into them because there's a lot of questions. And they're going to be a mixture of ones related to technology, some just related to markets and things like that. So,
so Roland, just before you wait, again, don't be shy. You might really ask anything you like, if it's at least related to audio networking, right? So just take it from there.
Anything you want to ask, we'll try and answer them. So hopefully with our collective skills, we can do that. I think a fairly straightforward technical question to start off with: how much bandwidth is used for stereo AES-67 stream?
Right. Maybe that's my turn to give you hints there. While there is no such thing like a standard stereo AES stream definition, we can derive it from the mandatory requirements AES-67 sets forth, which means that we have a stereo stream, 2 channels. I assume professional audio quality, that means 24-bit of audio and 48 kilohertz. And then AES-67 calls for a mandatory packet time to be supported of 1 millisecond. So if we assume this is the stream setup, each AES-67 stereo stream requires roughly just below 3 megabit per second. And if you change any of those parameters, like the bit depth or the sampling frequency or the packet time, that of course can increase or decrease the required bandwidth for such a stream. Okay, and I've got a few, trying to sort of collect these questions together to give them a bit of context together. So another question is, will AES-67 ever be unicast? Claudio?
Yeah, well, it already is.
Simple answer, yes, of course.
Actually, AES-67 mandates to support unicast and the SIP protocol to set up unicast streams between devices. Probably the question is rather aiming towards the real market situation, and in that case, it looks a bit different because we see quite some AES-67 implementations that do not support unicast. So in that case, it's really a question that needs to be targeted to or a question to the manufacturers if unicast is needed or required for certain applications, certain projects, and a manufacturer doesn't support it but still claims to be AES-67 compliant. It's actually not completely true. So this is a corner case. Strictly spoken, from the standards view, it's not a corner case. It's mandatory. So if you say you support AES-67, you have to support it.
Yes, and just to add in, as you just said, I know that, well, of course, every AES-67 implementation supports multicast. Most of them also support unicasts. Maybe it's not so obvious how to actually set up a unicast stream, and it depends on the implementation, on the user interface. And if I remember this right, Claude, I guess you have something to demonstrate here, how this, for example, can be done in one of your products. So you should take it from there with the screen sharing.
Yes, thank you for giving me screen access. I have here an example of how it is simple and relatively efficient to design streams in your network which will be unicast versus multicast instead. I have here, just for the sake of the quick presentation, 2 units. 2 are both here also listed as a happy and anonymous converter. And if you go to the matrix on the right side of our audio network managing tool, you may decide to establish a stream, let's say from the Anubis combo source to the happy AES output here. And if you look at the upper corner here, you see you can either decide to apply this stream as a unicast or as a multicast. I'm going to hit apply unicast here. The system will now establish these 2 channel stream in unicast mode, and I can eventually add another stream which I decide this time to apply as a multicast stream here. And I have now these 4 channels going from one device to the other, 2 of which are colored in blue saying it's unicast, and 2 are colored in purple, which are multicast. That
Very
is
good. Yeah, so that we have already seen a tool which you have developed now offering to the public, which is NMN. I think we will have more questions related to NMN later. So Roland, let's just go ahead.
There are indeed, yeah, there are indeed some NMN questions later as well. So wanted to ask the members of the panel if there's a development roadmap for AES 67, and indeed someone has asked, will there be an AES 67-7? So I think that
AES 67-7. That's
I
interesting.
Because there's an ST2110-7, is there going to be an AES 67-7?
I guess it refers to 2022-7. So
Yeah,
redundancy in
right.
AES 67. And I think this is something which is actually indeed on a project list for the AES 67 task group currently. And yeah, probably maybe in the next revision of the standard, we will see something coming up there. But if you use 2110, ST2110-30, ST 2022-7, so stream redundancy with AES 67 as a central basis to exchange streams is already defined. So using ST2110 somehow provides AES 67 with redundant streaming.
So on a broader view, the question behind it is not just about redundancy, I would say, but also what is going on with AES 67. I just can tell you from participating in the AES standardization group, which covers the AES 67 maintenance, that we have a huge list of suggestions and improvements, which we are discussing and working into upcoming standards, standard revision. And this, of course, always takes some time, and we are also very, very careful in not breaking anything with the existing standard, because we have so many wonderful working implementations in the field. So we can't, change things in this existing standard and break the backward compatibility. And I guess this is something Daniel will later discuss as well when we touch on PTP version 2.1, which has just recently been released. So they were also keen of keeping backward compatibility in place. But speaking of standard evolution, Terry, I guess there's something you can add from the perspective of Ames and what the goals of Ames are in terms of fostering adoption and maintaining standards, so on.
Yes, I can talk a little bit about Ames. If many of you probably know, Ames stands, as Andreas mentioned, for the Alliance.
Would you like
for
me to give you access control?
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
Show,
okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
Let me show first this slide about the members. So. Can you see that now?
Yes, very good.
Yeah. So these are the members of Ames. Ames is an alliance of a wide range of companies, and it began back at the end of 2015. And at that time, there was obviously recognition that IP media networking could have great potential in the broadcast industry, but there was also indications that there might be several different proprietary solutions emerging that could cause some fragmentation in the industry, and it could cause some risks for both manufacturers and for broadcasters to have to choose among these different proprietary solutions. And if you chose the wrong solution, it could be very bad for your business. So Ames came along and brought together a lot of the leading companies, including manufacturers and including broadcasters, with the goal of establishing a common set of open standards that everyone could get behind, and we could then move forward with IP media networking without the risk that somebody might choose the wrong solution and end up investing in something that ended up becoming obsolete. So that started back in 2015, focused mainly on the broadcast industry. In 2017, Ames merged with the Media Networking Alliance, which was much more an audio-focused organization that was built up to promote and educate people about AES-67. And that then started to expand the scope of Ames to also include areas like Pro Audio and Pro AV. And so now Ames is continuing to promote the adoption of these open standards and broadening its scope to go into areas like Pro AV. And at the core of what Ames is promoting, we have here the Ames Road Map, if you can see that. And now Ames itself is not a standards organization, so we don't create standards ourselves, but we work closely with standards bodies like AES and SMPTE. And then we ratify those different standards to become part of the Ames Road Map. And this is a roadmap going from left to right in a sort of timeline. You can see it began with 2022-6 for SDI over IP. Then, of course, AES-67 was there from the very beginning of Ames. And then Ames was actually in existence a couple of years or so before the SMPTE SD2110 standards were ratified. And now they form a real core of the roadmap for Ames. That includes all the video and audio, ancillary data, timing data, and so forth as part of the roadmap. And then onto the right side of the screen, you can see some of the more recent additions to the roadmap, things to do with system environment and device behaviors, some of the NMOS specifications, and other things related to network environment and system parameters. And so this is the current state of the Ames roadmap, and we expect this will continue to evolve as SMPTE and NMOS create new standards and specifications that further enhance the total solution.
All right, Roland.
Pretty much summarize.
Okay, that's great. That's actually answered about 2 or 3 questions we've got here.
Okay.
So that's terrific, Terry. We've got someone really asking, why should I worry about Ravenna when they're a Dante user? What are the differences? If Dante is good enough, what does Ravenna bring that Dante doesn't?
That's a good question indeed. So if the prerequisite is if Dante is good enough, there's just no reason. Just go for it. I mean, if it's good enough, it's working, it's doing the job, there's no reason to change anything. As always, if you have a running system, never change it. On a wider scope, this would become, I would say, a very huge discussion. The key points actually are a bit of the application space. Dante has been designed for application in commercial audio applications like installations and live, where you need things to be easy to get easy installed, easy operated, and they all have the same look and feel. And so the whole model Dante is being marketed and also implemented into devices is that all devices basically share the very same functionality. They have the very same user interface, and it doesn't matter at the end if you connect a Yamaha device with a with any other device which speaks Dante. At the end, it's the sole or the only Dante implementation which talks to each other, and it's just a housing which has a different color, brand, or a number of interfaces around it. Ravenna originated from the needs and the requirements of the broadcast industry. And in broadcast, we needed much more flexibility, adaptability towards various use cases, more flexibility in performance characteristics, like having the ability to transport higher channel counts at the same time or at much shorter latencies, etc., as well as full AS3 bit transparent data. And so Ravenna was designed from the ground up according to the requirements of the broadcast industry. So whenever you come to a project where the flexibility of the Dante implementation, which is offered by Dante, is not enough to apply or to match the requirements of your particular application, then it's definitely a good point to look at Ravenna technology. Other than that, we can say through AES67, these two technologies have been made interoperable as well. So you can use Ravenna and Dante devices even in the same network and interoperate between those through means of AES67. So, but I guess, yeah, that's it from a broader point of view.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Andreas, I may have one point to add,
yes,
if I may, which is that in particular situation, and that's the case for many of our users with a need for ultra high resolution audio, there are simply situations where Dante is not good enough, where only Ravenna allows to support these extreme sampling frequencies, DXD or DSD, which are not at all allowed in the Dante environment. So here again, it offers flexibility that you can't find in Dante.
Yeah, that's because, maybe I just add that, it's because that we, with Ravenna, we don't have a single source of silicon or implementation. We have open up the technology description so that every manufacturer who was interested or is still interested in implementing Ravenna can do so and expand the implementation and tailor the implementation around his very own needs without breaking the Ravenna compatibility. And merging is a perfect example for doing this by adding DXD, DSD at 384 kilohertz with the same standard Ravenna means for transport and advertisement, etc. So they are still fully compatible within a Ravenna environment, but can transport these high quality audio signals. And yeah, so that's different. Ravenna implementations come from a huge range of manufacturers, whereas the Dante implementation, they are all built basically by Ordinate in Australia.
Okay, I've got a couple more technical questions. Firstly, one about AES67. If I change the number of channels in my AES67 stream, should the receiver automatically adjust?
Claudio, I guess you can add something to that. The first thing I have to say is that AES67 calls for a stable stream setup during the lifetime of the stream. So AES67 in some place in the document says once the stream has been set up, it should not change. The receiver can assume that the stream setup will not change throughout the lifetime of the stream. So technically spoken, you would have to set up a new stream with the changed parameters and subscribe to that new stream. Ravenna, in contrast, has the ability to change stream parameters for an ongoing stream on the fly, as we use a certain method of transporting the related SDP information from the sender to the receiver. This is done through an RTSP connection. So whenever the transmitter changes the stream setup, for example, adds channels to the stream or uses a different packet time, a different encoding format, whatever, the receiver is immediately notified of the change and can adapt its decoding algorithm accordingly. Anyone else? That's it basically.
Okay, I've got a few, I've been trying to group questions together. I've got a few clocking questions. So firstly, is it necessary to use PTP-aware switches in an audio over IP environment?
Guess it goes to.
Maybe I can answer that question. In general, it is not mandatory to use PTP-aware switches, but it is recommended. If you look at the accuracy demands of certain audio over IP environments, for example, distributing a word clock reference at 48 kilohertz, if you want to regenerate that from PTP, you need a minimum accuracy of around a microsecond. And you can reach that with non-PTP aware switches if the network load on these switches is not too high, if you have good filtering in your slaves, and can eliminate the spikes in the delay between the master and slave. So it is possible, and it was used that way in the beginning. But as more and more uncertainties come up in the network with more devices, more traffic, or even in the environment of 2110-30, where you also have video streams on your switches, it should be mandatory to have PTP-aware switches in those kind of environments. In pure audio environments, I mean, Andreas or Claudio, please help me in this case. It might be okay to have not PTP support in the switches, but however, it is recommended to be on the safe side.
Yeah, quick addition basically is it's the requirement you set forth for your application. If you're going for sample accurate stream alignment in not heavily loaded and not too large networks, standard managed switches should be okay, because the precision requirement or the accuracy requirement is about a plus minus 10 microseconds, something along, plus minus half a sample. Yes. So that should go pretty well without PTP-aware switches. Dante, for example, has never ever required PTP-aware switches just because they do sample accurate alignment, and they don't have this phase accurate alignment as a requirement, which you quite often will find in broadcast applications where you also have legacy devices, let's say MADI converters, which are running on external word clock, and there's very crucial to have this phase accurate alignment of the media clocks. Claudio, I guess you can add to this a little further.
Yeah, I in strong favor of using PTP-aware switches, because the reason is that if you plan a system, you might take into account what's there currently, and it looks like it's sufficient that you just get away with a standard switch because you have just a few devices there. But then over time, the requirements change, new devices come in, you realize you need more streams, you need more channel count on the same network. And suddenly you realize my PTP sync information degraded, and at some point externally synchronized devices that are, for instance, not network-based, but synchronized to a very tight word clock or sync generator, maybe even from the same grandmaster, will not be able to cope with the PTP jitter happening in the network anymore, and then the only solution would be to exchange the switches in that setup, and that can be, depending on when it happens, quite hurtful. So if you are really sure that your setup will not change because maybe it's just a small recording setup in the flight case or so, okay, then it's maybe safe to go for a standard switch. But if the setup might change, I'm in strong favor of choosing a PTP-aware switch, and they are not that expensive anymore. So if you invest in a proper audio over IP system, this should be part of the budget, I think.
Yeah, I guess when all these systems, be it Dante, AS67, RAVENNA, whatever, had been laid out, PTP-aware switches were really expensive at that time. and we looked at the quality of service capabilities of managed switches, and we found that QoS, if it's properly configured, is a very good mean of making sure that the previous PTP packet arrived with the least amount of jitter, and so that the accuracy doesn't go down on the receiving side. So I would say in general, you don't need PTP-aware switches, but since those PTP-aware switches are now getting more available and less expensive in at least critical or larger installations, it's a strong requirement to go with PTP-aware switches, but it's not a necessity.
Okay, that's great. Very comprehensive set of replies there. A couple more timing questions, actually. What's the difference between transparent and boundary clocks?
Both are PTP-aware switches, and the main difference between those two concepts is that a boundary clock contains a real clock that has to be synchronized on one side. So one part of these switches is in slave mode, and all others are in master mode, and a real clock is synchronized in these boxes. Whereas a transparent clock, as the name says, transparently passes the packets through and just makes relative measurements between the input and the output of the packet. So a transparent clock just has to be synchronized, so frequency aligned to the grandmaster, whereas a boundary clock needs to be fully synchronized by time of day, phase, and frequency. So a boundary clock has the advantage that it takes the load from the master and it reduces the PTP traffic in the network, because it just has a hop-to-hop communication between those switches. But they have to be on the other side. They have to be monitored, because they are real clocks. And if they freak out, then your complete timing in the network is destroyed. And on the other hand, transparent clocks are easy to maintain, are easy to set up, very easy to configure, but they scale not well with the number of endpoints you have in the network. So transparent clocks pass all the packets through, and the master must be capable to respond to all of these delay requests from the slaves. So it depends on your design, it depends on your concept, which types of PTP-aware switches you should use. Sometimes a combination of both is recommended, depending on your architecture. But from the technology point of view, if it's proper implemented, you can reach a similar level of accuracy on your full path from master to slave. So from the technology, there is no difference in accuracy you can achieve. It's just the concept behind it that is different.
That's great. I've got two questions here that are actually sort of similar, so I'm going to ask them to be answered at once. One is it feasible to transport AES67 streams over the internet? However, the other question is, if I have, which helps answer this, I think, but also gives more to think about. If I have two locations, both with master clocks locked to GPS, can I stream Ravenna across the internet?
This question has come up quite sometimes. In principle, if your connection between transmitter and receiver provides LAN-like quality of service, that means no packet loss, a bounded amount of packet jitter, and making sure through one or other means that your timing information is precise enough to regenerate a stable media clock, which usually is the case by not distributing PTP over the WAN connection, but using two GPS or GNSS referenced grandmaster clocks for local time distribution. Then this should work right away. Now, the internet has a lack of certain of these requirements. For example, something like zero packet drop is rarely to be seen on the internet. And if there are means of covering packet drop, hidden means covering packet drops, they go along with quite a lot of packet jitter or long latency, basically. So both is difficult to accommodate. I have seen, on the other hand, some internet-based connections which offer some decent quality of service, so it might work, but there just won't be a guarantee. Also, 2022-7 redundant streaming may not help in this situation if the second or third backup route has the same impediments. So I still tend to say any AES67 based transport, be it Ravenna, be it Dante, be it whatever, over the internet won't really work reliable. If you have a controlled and managed wide area connection where you can ensure a bounded amount of packet jitter and zero packet loss, or have another route which you also fully control, where you can cover any possible, any potential packet loss on one of these connections, then this is a basis for reliable and secure transmission. Keep in mind, AES67 and all these technologies have been designed for lowest latency transport of high quality audio signals in usually in campus area networks, corporate environment networks, and not throughout the world.
Okay. While we're talking about difficulties with connections and things like that, what's the best approach to nail down reasons for intermittent audio problems on a Ravenna network? Is there some kind of surveyor software? And I think, Claude, you might have some kind of answer for that.
To a certain degree, the tool I just showed you earlier is a tool that is geared up to give all users a heads up when things go bad, when there is a problem of mismatch of sampling rates, when there is a problem of a stream that is no longer available or anything like that. There are warnings and error messages appearing in Animan that guide the user to correct his system. And we have plans to expand that to additional monitoring of the very matrix of the network, including the switches. And we'll certainly start doing that over the second part of this year by introducing new features along next releases of Animan, while we progress on maintaining a tool and making sure this tool gives the proper indications to users, which is fundamental to make networking commonly accepted.
So to just add for this, as you just also said, Claude, most of the AES67 or Ravenna devices have some sort of status display anyway. They would indicate if they have lost packets or if the synchronization is not good enough. So on the broader view, the question is, of course, what is the cause for intermittent audio problems? Are you just losing packets on the way? Are there just too much packet jitter on the way so that packets arrive too late? Or is it a problem with the synchronization? And so you need to find out first what actually is the cause before you can take any anti-measures. And as I said, most of the devices offer you a good display of how good is the synchronization status, what's the offset, how is the jitter on the PTP, what is the currently observed packet jitter, what is the suggested delay setting in order to cope with the maximum observed packet jitter. Is there packet loss? Usually you can't do anything with a packet loss from the side of the transmitter or sender. So these are things you have to look into. And of course, there are tools available, not necessarily from Ravenna device manufacturers, but starting with something, timing and synchronization again. Meinberg offers the PTP track count, which is a good monitoring tool for looking at the quality of your time synchronization at various places in the network. Then there are tools where you can monitor packet drops just by looking into switches and see if packets on particular ports or links have been dropped. There's also a tool which is called Wireshark. Of course, everybody knows Wireshark. It's always a good tool to use and see what is the behavior of the packets on a port I'm connected at, and looking into, do I lose packets here? Are my sequence numbers okay? What is the time between packets and these kind of things? I admit these are all, sort of expert tools. It's not just like green, yellow, red traffic light. But there are tools out there which originate more from the side of, general networking, because that's what we use. We use networking technology, and most of the errors we may see originates from something which goes wrong with the network.
Yeah, and there is a whole, most of those tools you've talked about, there's a whole free tools section on the RAVENNA website where a lot of those tools can be accessed and linked to. Yeah. While talking about Anaman, does Anaman connect with Lavo consoles?
Yes, it does. It does in the more recent iterations. We have now expanded the support for several Lavo devices. I don't have the list right now in my head, but many Lavo devices are now seen by Anaman and can be controlled and connected via Anaman. Absolutely. Now, that was in high demand, yes.
Okay, that's great. I've got a question going back to Ames. So I think this is one for Terry. Is Ames exclusively focused on broadcast because of its roots of connection with SMPTE 2110 and things like that? Is it exclusively focused to that?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, Ames began with a strong focus on broadcast, but after it merged with the Media Networking Alliance, the scope expanded into Pro Audio and Pro AV. And as part of that scope expansion, we created a working group inside Ames for Pro AV industry activities. And they have recently been working on an initiative called IPMX, which is for IP Media Experience, which is intending to bring the same set of common standards from the broadcast world over into Pro AV market for both audio and video networking. So that's something that's been going on for, I think, a little over a year now. But also it's worth mentioning in parallel to that, of course, AS67 continues to be in its own right a core part of the Ames Road Map. And so within the Pro AV market or live sound or what have you, we're still continuing to promote the use of AS67 as an interoperability standard for connecting together between different audio network solutions like Ravenna, Dante, QLAN, and so forth. I know Andreas has been quite involved in the IPMX initiative, so maybe he would have a few comments about that.
Yeah, actually, IPMX is the Internet Protocol Media Experience, which adds extensions to the Ames roadmap you have shown earlier, Terry, in order to fulfill the typical requirements you'll see in Pro AV applications. And so IPMX is the keyword here, and I've just pasted a link into the chat, which should be visible for all. For this link goes to a video which has been recorded as part of the IP Showcase Summer Series, where Ames and VSF are heavily involved. And in this presentation, I explain what these additional requirements and parts are, which are added to the already existing Ames ingredients, so to say, or Ames roadmap, in order to fulfill the requirements for the Pro AV market. So yeah, Ames is also stretching out into the Pro AV applications.
Okay, that's all very good. Where should we go next? We're actually doing quite well. Discovery and control is still challenging. Is NMOS the answer? Silence from the
It's
panel.
one answer.
Yeah, discovery and control, of course, are important topics for an audio solution. Again, unlike Dante, which is a closed all-in solution, which definitely covers discovery and control of devices and resources on the network, and makes it possible to connect endpoints or I/O points with each other. AS67, RAVENNA, SENTI 2110 are all open standards, mostly covering synchronization and transport, whereas RAVENNA is going a bit further and also including discovery and basic stream setup. I wouldn't call it device control. It's definitely not device control, but it's a stream control setup. The reason why these solutions are so different is that on one hand, Audionet is offering with Dante a closed solution which fulfills the requirements and needs of a particular application market, and they do it pretty good on their side. And all the others like AS67, RAVENNA, SENTI 2110, they were more on a sort of a layered approach where we cover synchronization and transport and stream formatting and those things in one part of the standards, and then we left it open what other type of methods or standards to use on top of these basic standards in order to build a system for the requirements you have for a particular application. So, and manufacturers, of course, offer more than just RAVENNA or 2110. They offer full systems. Like, for example, Lavo has a full system approach with the VSM control system, where they incorporate all these transport and PDP stuff as the basic transport mechanism, but then add control, device control, management, system management on top of that. And also Animan is going sort of that on a smaller scale, but on a very, very comprehensive, useful way to cover these functionalities. So, and then of course, NMOS was questions. NMOS is a number of specifications developed by AMBA. NMOS is the Network Media Object specifications, and the intention is to fulfill or to fill the layers on top of the existing standards. And so they have come up with some specifications like ISO 4 for resource discovery and registration, ISO 5 for broad connection management, and then ISO 8 for channel assignment on devices and so on. And these are all layered approaches for adding functionality to build complete systems. These are not the only ones, as I pointed out. So is NMOS, IS, whatever, the answer for, potentially missing discovery and registration and connection management functionality? They can be, but they are sure not the sole answer.
Okay, that's all. That's great. Where are we? Shall we do something a little bit more technical? Oh, here's one. Is there a maximum latency specified for RAVENNA or AS67? They indicate that Dante seems to be capped at 10 milliseconds. Is this hardware or software specific, or on a case-by-case basis?
It's very simple. I mean, the latency basically means the packet jitter you have to expect on a given network. Usually in the targeted networks, like local area networks, you rarely need anything beyond 10 milliseconds. But for cases, particularly going over WAN connections, or you have some processing stages in between several chain of streams, and you want to align audio with video, or several audio streams running different routes, or even align audio output on those hanging speakers, some one pair hanging at the stage, others hanging further back into the audience. You have acoustical delay, and you want to be sure you deal with all these various alignments. Then you might have requirements for having more than 10 milliseconds. And so from the beginning in RAVENNA, we required devices to offer at least 20 milliseconds per stream as a available buffer, which doesn't mean that you always have 20 milliseconds of delay, because delay is something you can choose on a per stream basis, depending on what you actually need at that particular receiving point. AL67 calls for 17 times the packet time as a minimum recommendation, but it only requires technically to have 3 milliseconds, which was sort of a, how do you call it, a compromise actually to accommodate the Dante devices on one side, where some of them weren't able to offer more than 5 milliseconds of maximum latencies. But on the other hand, we also wanted to accommodate software-based transmitters, and software-based transmitters by nature have already a larger packet jitter before that packet even comes out on the network. So we concluded in AS67 on recommending on 17 times the packet time, so that's 17 milliseconds as a minimum offered latency, but it's not a strict requirement, and so that's why you see various implementation specifications, particularly on the buffer capability on receiving devices.
Because I've got a supplementary bit. The question is saying they have a stable stream of receive and transmission of over 80 milliseconds. And then
some of the RAVENNA implementations or some of the software-based implementations, they offer even more latency adjustment or buffer capabilities. Basically, at the end, it all depends on the available RAM, which can be assigned to a particular incoming stream, resource.
Yeah, especially if you work with wide area transmission, you can easily end up with 40, 80 or more milliseconds of just round trip delay between the different cities or locations where your devices are located, and in that case you might even require more. And actually in SD 2022-7, for instance, there are several levels defined for the stream redundancy, and they mention different maximum latencies that are allowed between the two legs ending up at the device. And this can go up way beyond 150 milliseconds and even more. I think 400 is the level D or so, level C. So it goes quite up high, and it really depends on the implementation whether a device can cope with that or not.
Okay. I've got a couple of questions about PTP. Firstly, well, I think you can answer them both together. What are the new features in PTP 2.1 as opposed to version 2? And should I worry about upgrading to 2.1 on my network?
First of all, the basic message that should be sent out after the version 2.1 was published is that it is fully backward compatible to version 2. So a version 2.1 Grandmaster will be able to synchronize to a version 2 slave, and also vice versa. So all new features are optional. You can use them if you want, but you don't have to use them if you don't want, or if you want to just keep the version 2 implementation running, even if you have a version 2.1 Grandmaster in place. There are some features that will increase the robustness of the PTP infrastructure. For example, multi-master capability that one Grandmaster can send out sync messages on separate domains simultaneously, so that a slave is able to receive that simultaneously on different domains and make a time comparison between the potential masters, and can detect a false ticker master and eliminates that one out of his own list of trusted sources. What is also possible is adding a so-called security TLV appended to the messages. This is used for authentication between a Grandmaster and a slave, so that only trusted Grandmasters are used in a network, where you can configure that this communication has to be secured in a way that at least the packets are signed and definitely will come from a certain Grandmaster. What it does not protect you is, for example, to have a delay attack in the middle. For example, if you hold the packet from master to slave and wait until you resend it to your end node, then your delay is still artificially enlarged, and you will not have the same accuracy. But at least the grandmaster in this case can be trusted. So there are a couple of other features. We can fill 1 hour with that, no problem.
Yeah, actually, we actually have filled a full webinar.
Yes.
One of our recent webinars covered PTP, particularly also the difference in PTP version 1, version 2.1. If you're interested in that, just go to the RAVENNA events webpage, where all the recordings and slides of the recent webinars are available for free download.
Yes,
Sorry,
that would be that would be a source for more details, definitely. Yeah.
Okay, I've got a question asking about different ways manufacturers have implemented AES67. Is there any information on that that people can go to understand how they've implemented it, download drivers, that sort of thing?
Terry?
Yes. Yeah, we've had a lot of questions today about things like unicast and buffer sizes and so forth. And it's not always easy to find out which device supports which parts of the standard. Some parts of the standard are mandatory, some are not mandatory but recommended. It can be quite difficult for an end user to know what each device does. So we, in collaboration with the AES, we've put together this AES67 PICS summary repository, and manufacturers can upload their documents there. And it's a very simple single sheet of page that tells you these key points. Does this support which kind of does it support unicast? Does it support various aspects of the standard? And I don't know if we have access to the link to that, although I'm sure if you just
I'll put it in the chat just now.
Everybody.
Yeah. So
that's
that's
already
a fairly new repository. And so there's still, there's not so many documents there yet. I'd like to see a lot more manufacturers submit their summary documents, and I think that could be a valuable resource for people.
Okay. Got another question just come in. How many switch hops are allowed on a Ravenna network while still providing proper PTP clock support?
Again, there's no bounded number. It all ends up observing the achieved accuracy at the let's say furthest node from the grandmaster, given that you have QoS management properly in place, and also taking any dynamic traffic situation into account. I would say 5 switches can easily be managed, but again, as we discussed earlier, this all depends on the traffic on the network, on other aspects which may change dynamically. And if you definitely plan to go into larger network configurations, it might be wise to insert a boundary or transparent clock on one or the other part of the network to improve the achievable accuracy further downstream.
Okay. Where are we? We're doing very well, getting through lots of questions.
Oh, we're coming close to the time, right? But yeah, go ahead. We should have time for one more.
Sorry, yes, time has slipped. I think we'll just try and do a couple more questions then. What's the difference between the AES67 media profile and the ST 2059-2 profile?
So both profiles are based on the default profile of PTP, and you have to know that AES67 media profile was developed a couple of years earlier than 2059. And the SEMT people have had some more requirements or different requirements that they have put into their SEMT profile, and they added a so-called synchronization metadata information in their management message, an additional management message that is sent out once per second. And this is something that is missing with the AES67 media profile. But synchronization-wise, it's absolutely the same. It's based on the same network operation mode, so it's a layer 3 communication, multicast, end-to-end delay mechanism. So it's compatible actually, but to have a proper interoperability between AS67 devices, or let's talk about 2110-30 devices in a 2110 environment, they have to take care about the proper handling of these management messages that come from the 2059-2 profile. So there are some constraints. Maybe Andreas can also talk about this, but in general, they are compatible in terms of the way a synchronization is transported. The message rates are a little bit lower in the A67 media profile, but a SMPTE profile master can synchronize an A67 media profile slave without any problems.
Actually, when this came up, this came up with a PTP standard or PTP default profile, AS67 media PTP profile, and the 2059 SMPTE profile. Joint workgroup of AES and SMPTE experts sit together and evaluated the overlap of these three different profiles and found a clear overlap among all these three profiles when it comes to synchronization rate and delay request rate and so on. And this has been published as a report by the AES. It's an AES R16 whatever report. So if you go to the AES website, you should be able to identify this paper. On a wider range, of course, we also have conducted investigation about differences and commonalities between AS67 and 2110-30 streams. And this is being published under Ames. So if you're going to the Ames website, I will show the URL just right at the end of the presentation. You will find a paper about commonalities and constraints between AS67 and 2110, which also indicates the PTP differences there and commonalities, of course.
And indeed, also, Andreas, you recently held a webinar that's on the RAVENNA website, again, that highlights that. And again, there's been quite a lot of discussion during this today concerning PTP. And again, I recommend those who want to dig deeper into that, go back and look at the Daniel's webinar on timing, which, as I said, is also on the RAVENNA website. They're both excellent pieces to look at. We have come really to the end. We've just crept over the hour. We've managed to get through just under 30 questions, which is pretty good. Some questions being sort of merged together and people asking the same thing. Do any of you gentlemen have any closing remarks? Anything else you wish to comment on or mention or refer to? If not, I do have one final question for Andreas. In that case, Andreas, you're holding a series of webinars. When's the next one?
Yeah, okay, let me just bring up the two URLs about more answers or more resources on the network, RAVENNANetwork.com website on the resources, and also the Ames website offers quite a number of interesting resources regarding AS67 or 2110 and also IPMX, as mentioned earlier. So these are the URLs. Again, these slides and the recording, of course, will be made available on the RAVENNA website, as all the previous ones. And the next one is coming up next Tuesday, again at 1500 Central European Summertime. And this starts a series of product and application webinars. The first one being AOIP bridging with Ross Video's IGI platform. And that will be presented by Bill Runopoulos and Angelo Santos from Ross Video. And we will have further product and applications webinars coming up, which you can also look up on the RAVENNA events page. And yeah, that basically concludes today's roundtable. I hope you have enjoyed our discussion. We received a lot of interesting questions and hope there was something in the bag for everyone. I'd like to thank all the participants again. So thank you, Claudio, Claude, Daniel, Terry, and of course, Roland for being with us today, and hope to see you maybe even in person very, very soon, if possible, somewhere in the world again. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thanks for joining in, and hope to see you on our next upcoming webinars again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.